Thank you, colleagues from Lengua. Peaceful greetings to all of us. Good morning and good afternoon for those joining us from Australia. Peaceful greetings to all of us. In Australia, it is a habit to respect the knowledge and contribution of the people. I would like to give this respect on behalf of the AIC.
Between the Makassans, where I'm from, and the Yolngu people of Eastern Amphanland, a relationship still celebrated through the stories, arts, and songs of the Yolngu people. We pay our respects to elders, past, present, and future. Bapak Ibu, para narasumber dan peserta yang kami
For
muliakan,
speakers and participants, welcome to the second PAIR Summit. PAIR is interdisciplinary research and sometimes pushed by demand in particular in South Sulawesi. This is supported by the governments of Indonesia and Australia in partnership with 11 universities from Indonesia and Australia. This is a forum for researchers and policymakers from both countries where they share knowledge and opinions about important issues about in the inclusive and sustainable development in Indonesia, especially in South Sulawesi. This summit focused on transportation, logistics, and supply chain to maximize the use of the first railway track in South Sulawesi. Let's hear together the opening remarks from the Ministry of Transportation of Indonesia. Honorable speakers and participants of the second day PAIR Summit for the topic of transport, logistics, and supply chain. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning for those who are in Indonesia and good afternoon for those in Australia. Greetings to all of us. It's an honor for me to be able to be present to meet you all virtually in this forum. I believe that despite the COVID-19 pandemic has limited our capacity to personally meet and have a face-to-face discussion, however, we will still manage to do our work in a good manner so that we are still able to achieve our common objectives. I'd like to extend my gratitude to the Australian-Indonesia Center, AIC, for the opportunity for me to speak in this forum. I highly appreciate AIC that has initiated the PAIR program, which is the Partnership for Australia and Indonesia for Research, and for paying specific attention to and raising issues related to conditions in South Sulawesi, especially on issues of the development of the railway track of Makassar-Parepare. The Trans-Sulawesi Railway Project is a PPP project, which is the first one in the railway sector. It's currently at its development or construction stage. The Ministry of Transportation of Indonesia is targeting that the Makassar-Parepare Railway Track Project, which is 145 kilometers, will finish by early 2021. The development of the Makassar-Parepare Railway will bring positive impacts, especially in generating the local economy. The objectives of the development of the railway network in Sulawesi is to connect areas or towns or cities that have the potential for freight and commuting of people or communities in a large scale. For instance, to carry raw material, cement factory products, or mining products, and to support the development of integrated cities through integrating the coastal areas. The GOI, Government of Indonesia, hopes that the existence of the railway will improve accessibility and mobility of the communities. To accelerate development of those areas, in addition to increase that the railway may increase absorption of employment and the potential of improving the informal sector. With the operation of the railway track of Makassar Parepare, I am optimistic that this railway will give positive impacts for the flow of logistics of goods in South Sulawesi. I think by using the railway-based transportation mode, logistic costs will be economical. I estimate the cost of transporting logistic by road is 20% higher compared to using the railway. Therefore, industrial and agro-metropolitan actors from forestry, agriculture, or plantation will benefit from the Trans-Sulawesi Railway as public transportation in South Sulawesi. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, the Ministry of Transportation of Republic of Indonesia will always support AIC PAIR program. I hope the, the PAIR Digital Summit 2020 will bring benefits to all participants, in particular in relation to the research in South Sulawesi can bring positive impacts for the local communities and the surroundings. Thank you. Thank you for the Ministry of Transportation of Republic of Indonesia. We will start the first session of the summit, this forum of logistics and supply chain. Before that, I would like to ask the resource persons to open the video first.
Selamat pagi, Bu. Selamat siang.
Ini saya tadi hidup, sekarang malah mati karena dimatikan oleh host.
It's okay, Professor. We just let your video on for the first session. For the first session, we have guests from various people that I will explain. I am Rana Saleh, the coordinator of the research pair in South Sulawesi, and I will be moderator in this policy forum. The railway tracks is being developed in South Sulawesi. As the ministry mentioned, it connects the city of Makassar to three districts, Maros, Baru, and also Parepare, along 145 kilometers. The development of this railway track is the first one in Indonesia, in East Indonesia, and this is the early stage of the Trans-Sulawesi railway track, which is part of the National Infrastructure Program. This will increase the availability of transportation, not only for freight, but also for passengers. The presence of this will also open opportunity for the economy, especially for local economy and to increase the export of commodity and for the whole people of South Sulawesi. Ex Experiences show that this kind of transportation may not necessarily be beneficial for people without having it be sustainable. On how to maximize the impact of this railway track. Therefore, this in policy forum, we will have a spokesperson, Professor Wihana Virajaya, the economic staff from the Ministry of Transportation of Indonesia. Good morning, Professor Wihana. Then we have Mr. Prakosa. He is the technical director of PT Pelabuhan Indonesia or Pelindo 4. Good morning, Pak Prakosa. We also have Dr. Arafa, the head of the Office of Transportation in South Sulawesi. Good morning. Good morning, Bu Nana. Thank you, sir. And Dr. Hendra Fahri, he is the member of the infrastructure team of the governor for South
Selamat pagi
Sulawesi.
Ibu
Good
Nana
morning,
dan
Ibu Nana,
selamat pagi untuk buat semua.
and all. Thank you. And for everybody, I would like to ask Professor Wihana first to give us update about the development of railway in South Sulawesi and the vision of the central government on the impact of the railway in South Sulawesi. Thank you, Bu Nana. Good morning, everyone. I really appreciate today's event. The ministry has also directed that the Ministry of Transportation just prepared a system, and the system that we are preparing is the railway track from Makassar to Parepare. I will try to be quick. The ministry has said very clearly this Makassar Parepare railway track is to improve uh, what to connect places through railway so that people have access, corporation have access, and also the communities, even informal communities can have access when they want to travel as passengers. So in essence, the railway track will give impact also to certain areas, not only the corporations, but provide also economic opportunities to the maximum. So mobility of the use of the railway track will bring not only freight and passengers in a much better way. All right, next, please show my PowerPoint. What is interesting here is, next please, is that conceptually, the presence of railway will connect the production factors. It can be the employment, raw material, also technological transfer to the community. Bunana mentioned that it won't have impact on the people if we don't actually do our responsibilities. I will now talk about this. When we look at the pandemic, the minister and the president would really like to accelerate this to 2021 so that this can be a stimulus for the communities during this pandemic. So please show the impact of pandemic on the economy and distance. We all know about the COVID-19, about the lockdown, etc. But the essence is the economy has been contracted because we close and limit mobilities, capacities. We maintain protocols. As a result, economically, we experience contractions and output is reduced, and we are in recession. And what about the global condition? What about the regional condition? What about the national condition? And how about the condition of the South Sulawesi? And how about the condition of the districts within Makassar Parepare? How, including the sub-districts and villages, all experiences construction. That's why this project has to be accelerated, because this will be able to stimulate investment, government spending, the increase of output, but that is a process of multiplier effect, uh, and to end eventually reduce construction. Every country is experiencing construction. Everyone feels the impact on economic growth. As for stimulus and impact, they may differ from country to country, but our recovery in the world is second best after Thailand. So that's based on the most recent IMF report. What about the South Sulawesi context? In the past, South Sulawesi, the growth is always higher than the national figure, but now it's been dropped. That's why fiscal stimulus for health, social safety net, for incentives from the government, and other sources through banking, etc. It is hoped that this will increase export and import in South Sulawesi, so that we know that the growth has decreased due to the pandemic, and many employees have been losing their job. Now, let's move on. So South Sulawesi has been contracted in terms of the economy. So we need stimulus. Stimulus can be done through infrastructure and policies. As a result, on the supply side, once the railway track is concluded, all businesses, corporations, Tonas and Bosowa cement factories, and other business activities, exports and import of coals. So we will have a flow of goods. This is what we call stimulus. This is one that we want to accelerate. So in addition to the Makassar Harbor and Airport, then we will be able to fulfill the demand, supply, and demand. It used to be contraction. It will be able to move, and output will move also. So this is what is expected from the stimulus, positively increase the economy. So as a result, we will have an increase in output in terms of transportation. What is most important in the past, before the railway, we used the road to transport goods. So where the time is uncertain, so it created inefficiency. What is more important, the minister mentioned that to develop infrastructure, you have to think comprehensively. It's not just 1 plus 1 is 2, but 1 plus 1 is 7. So we need to create values, chain of values, and maximize the economic value if it is well coordinated between Parepare and Makassar. Next, please. Now, what has been developed by the government, these B segment, C segment, and how many districts that have been passed by and what have been constructed, etc. The minister mentioned this is one of the railway projects based on PPP, because the government has a concern in terms of budget. So it works with the uh, government enterprise and other private parties. So this is one of the breakthroughs on how we develop infrastructure in cooperation in terms of fund with third parties, with state enterprises and the private sectors. So this is the paradigm setting for infrastructure for the first time in railway. So this is the data about what we have done so far. Next, please. Now, so from the global concept, now we go down to the local concept. And this is about the operational part. So it is hoped that once we have this, this will be also connected to the harbor. So we will be able to connect the airport and the sea transportation on how we integrate the sea transportation, etc. What is important is that this railway track, the Makassar Parepare track, in addition to carrying freight and cargo, but it also linked in an intermode transportation. But what is important is collaboration, not only for this Parepare and Makassar railway, but also collaboration between national government and the local government, but collaboration between ministries and agencies that are and also Ministry of the economy and maritime, how to do this collaboration well, and the connectivity of ideas, authorities, budgeting, all has to be integrated. So this is the one of the keywords of the collaboration. Next is integration. After we collaborate, then we integrate. This is it. To integrate is one of the impacts once this happens. I think Pak Prakoso will focus more on the Pakasar port, which is Pelindo 4, on how to integrate the toll road, whether how we are going to deal with the freight. Whether goods will be able to go straight to the port with the improvement of link between Makassar and Parepare that will maximize the capacity of the port of Makassar, the industrial cluster, export import will increase. These spots will increase the competitive advantage of Makassar compared to other places. So that's the keywords about collaboration between Pelindo, which is a state agency, and KAI as also a state enterprise, and local government. This will accelerate connectivity. So to create access, mobility, but remember our economy is market and non-formal market, formal and informal. Our duty is to unite them in terms of collaboration and integration. Those are the keywords that I need to remind you. So thank you very much. This is this academic research. This Parepare Makassar Railway has scientific and academic research. So that we don't have a silo think about this. This study has to be socialized to the people in a structured way, so that people really understand the benefit of this. Thank you very much, Professor Wihana, for the comprehensive explanation. Very important to bring us to the point of discussion. You and the minister emphasize on the need of collaboration and coordination. that is carried out well, so that the services of the railway, both for freight and passengers, can run effectively. I would like to ask Pak Prakosa about this freight, because this this railway will start and end at Makassar port. So how is this going to optimally increase logistics and supply chain? Thank you very much, Budana. It's true that what Pak Wihana said and also what the minister said, that we need connectivity, because connectivity will create access, and access will lead to mobility, and economic activities will run well. So please show my slide. At the moment, the Makassar port it serves 700 turtles, and most of them through existing harbor, because the new port harbor is under being prepared. And this is the layout of the Makassar port that will be built by Pelindo 4 in Makassar. Pelindo 4 developed this has since 2015, and it is planned to be full operation in early 2023. If you look at this port will have 1,000 meter length and 600 meter addition. In 2023, Pelindo will have a new port as long as 1,600 meter with an area of 120 hectares. With these facilities, this support with minus 16 meter depth will be able to serve up to 2.6 TEUs and 30 million tons of goods. This will be 4 times of the capacity of Makassar today. The presence of the railway, which is next to the port, the railway will be at 3G. You can see the green part on top of the red part. That's where the railway station will be. Once it's fully operated in 2023, the new Makassar port will serve about 1,000 TEUs. If the railway only serves the tonnage cement, of which capacity is 350,000 tons. The role of the railway is still quite small, with the assumption that one container can carry 20 tons. That means that 3,500 TEUs is about 1,700 box, whereas the containers, the capacity of containers is 1 million. That means it's only 1.5% of the railway that will serve the port. Whereas if we look at the target of the main plan of national main plan in 2030, they hope that the railway will increase as a transportation for freight about 17%. So we need to increase 10 times in 10 years. Despite the estimation of the proportion at the early stage is quite small, the potential to increase the proportion based on the target of the national target, I think it will be able to be achieved by looking at the facts, existing facts. The transportation of container that has been carried out by service providers in Makassar, 50% have been done from the north, from Parepare, Maros, and Baru. That means if out of the 55% is just 1/3 of it or 70% of it is taken by the railway, that target will be achieved. At the moment, Tonasa Cement sends that cement to export it through from the east to their own harbor. However, the depth of their harbor is only 11 meters. If Tonasa would like to send more than 40,000 tons, they will have to shift the transportation on the sea, and that will be high cost. So to anticipate that, Pelindo 4 has already offered to Semen Tonasa to move their activities from Bringkasi to Makassar that has 60 meter depth. This is 2B on the picture. So this is for multi-purpose. ABC is for containers. However, as Prof. Wihana mentioned, there are still many other industries that may be developed in Makassar. Among others, like seaweed that was discussed 2 days ago, or other industries that may grow with the presence of the railway track, so that the 70% target of the national government can still be achieved. I think that would be all for me as an introduction. Thank you, Kak Prakosa, for the explanation. You emphasized that the capacity of Pelindo is much bigger, and there is a possibility for it to absorb more logistics through Pelindo 4. I would like now to shift to Pak Arafa, the office head of transportation at South Sulawesi. As we know, the railway is for freight services and passengers to provide effective service. It has to be well linked with other transportation modes, both in transport district and city level. As head of the office of transportation, how are you going to explain this? Thank you, Bunana. I have some points to share.
Oke. Bisa dikasih host ya, co-host.
Sambil jalan, Bu Nana ya.
Iya, silakan Pak.
Yang saya hormati Pak Prof. Wihana dan
So, Professor Wihana, what the resource persons has mentioned are more or less similar to what I'm going to say, because in essence, this it's part of what I was going to say, but I will focus more on your question, Ibu Nana's question. So the role of the South Sulawesi government, as we often mention, the railway is the icon of the province, developed by the Ministry of Transportation.
dari sisi
On the side of passengers, of course, there are several potentials that we can mention. This railway will pass several harbors. It will, and Makassar Port and Garongkong Port. At its early stage, it is projected that the harbor will be connected in 2021. At the moment, all of the accesses of development have been accelerated by the Ministry of Transportation. I need to mention here that some of the potentials in relation to transportation in Parepare, we have about 500,000 passengers in a year on the road access between Parepare and Makassar. Every year we have more or less every day about 26,000 people or more cars using the road access between Makassar Parepare. This will have a huge impact on the increase or the use of railway. What is also important, of course, is with the freight transportation, what we hope is from the existing potential, there is production capacity in the Tonas cement factory, which produced 18 tons per year. We hope this potential, this is distributed to some areas in Eastern Indonesia and also export to Cambodia, Filipina, Bangladesh, Madagascar, Malaysia, Singapore, and East Timor. And of course, this is a potential when the railway is connected with the harbor, and this will increase again in terms of exporting to other countries. In Bosowa cement, the production is 2.5 million tons per year. And we hope that in the future, this will be able to make up the needs of cement in Eastern Indonesia and has the potential to be exported, because at the moment export has faced obstacles in the capacity of transporting them. The other potentials that we need to also mention in terms of fisheries, particularly seaweeds, the potential is very high, especially, and also from the mining sector. We also hope that it will become a prima donna of export once we have the railway track ready. The other potentials are that we really hope that this can also maximize the existing industries in South Sulawesi, of which in 2018, the production value was 706 billion rupiah. And the impacts is we can ensure that this will increase accessibility from production centers to marketing outlets in Makassar, to increase the functional relation between areas, between cities and villages, and support the potential of development of Sulawesi in terms of the support of accessibility of transportation. We have been carrying out efforts, and we have mentioned this to our colleagues at the cities. The areas that will be passed by the railway, like Maros, Pangkep Baru, and Makassar, we hope that this will be a transportation mode that can be directly accessed to help our people in the regions to increase their accessibility. I think that would be all, Bu Nana. Thank you very much, Bu Nana. Now I would like to move to Pak Hendra. Pak Hendra, after you've heard the previous presentation, seems like development in Sulawesi are quite exciting. There's so many things that we can do to increase people's livelihood. What about the provincial government view in this thing? So, peaceful greetings to all of us.
Kedengaran Ibu Nana?
Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you, Pak Hendra.
Alhamdulillah sudah beberapa pemaparan dari 3 narasumber.
So we've had several presentations, and I would like to comment on comment or to connect what the presenters have presented. I think this is very important as it's been mentioned that our target to have this to finish in early 2021. However, if we look at the development at the moment, I think we will try to look at on how to accelerate it. Therefore, we need to look at it from the spatial planning. Secondly, in terms of the land, in the land, thankfully, through the synergy between the national government, provincial and district government, at the moment, some of the areas have been finalized, and we divide them into two, the land that are owned by the people in the community and owned by the forestry office. So what we have done, like in Pangkep, fortunately, it's been finalized. I think this is an early step. Why? Because in terms of the provision of land, we have to see the process partially. Why? This is a challenge. This is a homework for both the national and provincial governments. Then
Lanjut, Pak. Halo, Pak Hendra. Suaranya mute, Pak. Suaranya mute.
Pak Hendra, you are muted.
Oke, barangkali sambil menunggu Pak Hendra bertambah.
While waiting for Pak Hendra, Prof. Vihana, I'll return to you. I think the people in South Sulawesi are quite excited waiting for this railway.
Nanti saya kembali ke Pak Hendra sebentar aja.
I will continue. Professor Vihana, we are now talking about passengers. The people in South Sulawesi are waiting. April 2021, it's mentioned that one of the legs have been developed. And to be effective, we need affordability and also policy of in terms of designing infrastructure. It should be inclusive for elderly and children. Have this been seriously thought about too? So we are preparing what we call the credibility of transportation, inclusivity, starting from people from their home. They will have ticketing system that is in line with for instance, from the village, there will be a village transportation system. We are thinking about the system. We are thinking of the seamless transportation system. What we are doing, and we look at the people as the social capital to improve this system. Once the transportation is already running, especially this is the pandemic, we will also look into the health protocols so that it will be safe for people to use it. And I think eventually this railway transportation will be trusted by people. Hopefully, with this, but of course, with this pandemic, people's income has been reduced because of the economic construction that needs to be stimulated. That maybe we need to provide subsidy. But the side of buyer, we have to provide the stimulus. This is the point that we are trying to find out. So in terms of logistics, how we are going to match the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic behavior. Which one needs the subsidy? Is it the provider of or the people? For the people, I think the small enterprises need to be stimulated also. So this is a multi-stakeholder thing that should engage the community. Thank you very much, Prof. Wihana. We have 7 minutes. Pak Hendra, I will return to you. Prof. Wihana and the minister keep on emphasizing that this is a good opportunity for South Sulawesi, and I would like to return to the people's economy. How will the government of South Sulawesi prepare the people, especially to create informal opportunity and provide access information for them so that they can also feel the benefit of the railway? Okay, that's good. That's true, ma'am. We need to make people sure that about the effectiveness of the presence of this railway. That's why we need to provide education to tell the people of the importance and what needs to be done after we have the railway. However, we cannot just force that to the people, but the government of South Sulawesi has to be present in connecting the people. We need to know that with the acceleration of development of the Barongkong, therefore, I'm sure that with the good planning, this employment will increase, investment will increase, and so we need to think about how to engage the people. And secondly, some of the programs carried out by the province in terms of stimulating the economy, we have the development of areas along the provincial roads, which is connected to the train, to the railway. With this, the people can use the rest areas as product to show their products. So to support that, the infrastructure development that we have to do is to build roads or transportation way to the roads to link with the railway. First is how to connect Pangkep district with Bone, with South Sulawesi by building roads to connect to Tonasa. So with the opening of new accesses in areas between Pangkep and Bone, there will be a new economic growth. With the acceleration of transportation from the city to the village, from the hilly areas in Baru to Pangkep, with this access, this will provide greater effects. In addition to that, how to connect the areas, the tourist areas in Sope to Makassar, not only by using public transportation through roads, but also about interconnectivity, about between Makassar and Baros through railway system, through Sope, so that the these accesses will generate new economy, new economic growth. On one side, in terms of the economy, we need to educate and empower the small enterprises to standardize them. The province will have to standardize products along the zone or the railway zones, because whether we like it or not, in the future, the people or passengers using the air transportation will be connected to the railway, and how the ports and airports are connected. And I think with this will open opportunities for small enterprises. But we need to remember to standardize them and to educate them. I think this is our homework together. Thank you, Pak Hendra. Now we have reached the end of our time, but I would like to return to Prof. Vihana. Prof. Vihana, this railway development is really expensive and it's quite complex to build it. How about the risk mitigation? In all countries, railways get subsidized, both investment and from the government. In urban areas, the economic value is higher than in pioneer railways. Therefore, in the strategy, we have to create collaboration. PPP is a partnership between government and third parties, but it can also be partnership with the people. People can be engaged to optimize asset. The people can use it also. So although it is expensive, but what is more important is the investment in railway has to expand to create inclusive economic opportunity for all, not just particular stakeholders. So that's why we create a joint team that can monitor the process of delivery, the process of planning, implementation process, and process of results, and also process change of outcome. The, for the government, corporation, and the people, I really agree if there that only the formal sectors that can enjoy it, but also the informal sector. So this is our joint responsible to maintain the risk. For instance, to avoid people from be getting marginalized. So we have to provide them with opportunities also. That's why we need to have inclusive economic opportunities. I think that would be all. Thank you. Before I end it, Pak Prakosa, do you have 30 seconds to say your statement? Thank you, or your hopes to create a comprehensive integrated railway. I think, like Pawiana said, the keywords are integration and cooperation. Plindo cannot do much without the roles of commodities, actors of commodities, regulators, the infrastructures, other infrastructure providers like Jasa Marga and IT, and also infrastructure providers. Pak Rafa, 30 seconds for you. What is your main hope? Thank you, Bu Nana. I really hope that this Makassar Parepare Railway can be concluded soon. I really hope that the transportation ministry can finalize this on schedule, because this is highly expected by the people of South Sulawesi. Secondly, of course, the government of the province will support whatever that is under its authority, which include the provision of the location. So we hope that this will be that is the railways between Maros Makassar can be concluded also. Lastly, I would like to have a subsidy for our people to enjoy the railway, especially for the passengers. So they will be willing to shift from road to railway transportation. I think that's all. Thank you very much, everybody, for the participation in this discussion forum this morning. I don't think we're running out of time. I think it is our common hope that the presence of the railway will be beneficial for every stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget, after this session, we will have the research forum. The researchers will provide you with updates about the results of their research until today and their future plans until 2022. I think that will be all of our forum today. So see you again in the next time. Peaceful greetings to all of us.
Hello, I'm Helen Brown, and welcome to the Australia-Indonesia Centre and our research panel discussion on the transport industry in South Sulawesi. I just had a bit of a sound practice then. Thanks for your patience in waiting for us to get to this part of the discussion. And this is where we talk to the researchers from the Australia-Indonesia Centre involved in the pair research on transport. Now, you've already heard from the policy panel, which is the senior leaders in the community and the officials, about what their hopes and aspirations are for this new rail line. But now we're going to hear from the researchers, whose job it is to go down to the ground and find out how it will work, what will work, and if it will work within those aspirations that we were just listening to. On our panel for today, we have Professor Siti Malkamha from the Universitas of Gadamaja, Professor Andreas Ernst from Monash University, and Professor Nyoman Pujuan from the Institute of Technology, 10 November. And all of them are senior fellows with the AIC. It's an absolute delight to be talking to them today. And we're also taking questions from you. So don't forget, you can talk to us through the chat line. Leave a question there. We will try and get to them and answer your particular questions about this important infrastructure project and what it means for South Sulawesi. Now, as we heard, the province is home to 8.8 million people, and it's the most populous on the island in that province. But it's only now that a railway line is being built to help with those transportation challenges. Once completed, that rail line will be 150 kilometres in length from Makassar to Parepare, and PAIR is working to understand how the railway line will impact on the people who live along it, especially in regards to trade, living standards, and personal aspirations. I'm going to start off this session by asking our panelists to answer a particular question to help us set the scene for this conversation. And I'll start with Professor Andreas. Lovely to see you again, Professor. It's a bit of a big question, but can you tell me, do you think this new railway line will have the transformational impact that is hoped for?
Yes, very big question, right? Let me start by saying it's really fantastic to see the government investing in infrastructure like this. I think railways are a fantastic form of transport. They are much more efficient than road, both in terms of costing less per ton moved, but also they're more environmentally friendly than road transport. So it's a great bit of infrastructure. But what's being built at the moment is primarily a sort of tracks, a railway track. That's not quite the same as having a complete transport system. So to have a transformational impact, we need not just the railway infrastructure, but a whole ecosystem of transport system around that helps to connect the people and the industries within the sort of catchment area of the railway to this railway to allow more efficient transport across the whole region.
And we'll get into some of those things that you've mentioned there, Andres. I'd like to go to Professor Siti from Universitas Gadjah Mada. Ibu, the population density along the railway line has been rising, as you have found. Can you just give us an outline as to the reasons for this? What is happening with that demographic? Thank you, Ibu, you're on.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, because like other area in Indonesia, the population always increases, and there are many activities along the railway. So we do hope that more people, the potential of people to use railways in the future will be higher, hopefully. But as Pa Andreas mentioned, that we need to have a connectivity to connect the railway with other transport, like maybe buses. And if people use like motorcycles, they need to have like a park and ride. And then we have to make sure that the ticket is affordable. So yeah, many people live or work along the railway lines, but we need to have more the contribution of the government from Sulawesi and also from the kota and kabupaten to give or to improve the connectivity, and also to have like public transport routes, something like that, because I haven't heard about that. They just said that they will give like license to public transport operators, but we haven't heard about any transport master plan, something like that. Yeah.
And I understand that your team has done a bit of work around the number of people who live along the railway line. You're looking at, what is it, a 5-kilometer radius? Just to be clear on that.
Yeah, I think so, something like that.
Okay, so that'll be some great data that will be collected as well within this research project. Professor Nyoman, to you, with your expertise in supply chains and logistics, is building a rail line enough to generate new ideas about moving goods or creating new industries and supply chains, or does it work more the other way around? I'm just trying to, it's a chicken and egg question.
Yeah, yeah. What we understand from theories that actually transportation demand is a derived demand. It is a result of the economic activity in one side and the demand on the other side. So if there is a cargo and there is a transportation path along that connecting between one point to the other, then the transportation infrastructure will work well. But if it is just building a railways, for example, without developing supply and demand, I think that would not be enough. So I think we have to develop the connection, as well as we have to make sure that we have cargoes that need to be transported along the ways.
Okay, that is obviously the work that you're going to be looking at. And maybe I'll stay with you, Professor Newman, because that idea around cargo and what can be transported is one of the things that you're looking at. Can you tell me, we have heard earlier in the policy session that there is room within the master plan for the port development, which will connect with the railway, to build a container yard, for instance, or a place where container trade can be conducted, where goods can be put in containers and moved onto ships or vice versa, from onto rail or off rail onto port. Do you see that as a feasible plan at this stage? And if you're unsure, perhaps you could explain some of the work you're doing to look at what might actually be useful at that port.
Yes, certainly that would be very much helpful, because then most of the cargoes actually that are transported in South Sulawesi, if we talk about containerized cargo, for example, are connected to the sea finally, or coming from the seaport. So if there is an intermodal terminal that includes the facility like container yard is developed in adjacent of the port, that would be very much helpful. But what I was mentioning about the cargo is that I think in South Sulawesi we also need to see much development of the manufacturing industry and other industry that will produce cargo. So we are not only facilitating the import flows, but also generating more of the export. Because what we see from the data is that 70% of cargoes going through the port of Makassar is actually in the form of imports, and only 30% is export. So I think there is a homework to develop more cargoes from South Sulawesi that will be going out from the South Sulawesi.
Professor Andreas, this is where I might bring you in, because this is one of your areas of expertise as well, and it's why the team works so well together. You're looking at, what is feasible in terms of developing industries around a rail line. Could you perhaps explain, looking at the ability to carry commodities for a start and build new industries, what is your focus on in that area?
Yeah, so maybe just to follow on to this idea from containers. So containers are so efficient because they allow you to easily change mode of transport from ship to rail, rail to truck, because you often still have to do the last mile by truck. And so it's not just sufficient to do this at the port end. You have to have these intermodal exchanges from rail to truck somewhere in these regional areas. And so that's important. And of course, every one of these mode changes, it carries a cost. And that's where it's sometimes challenging for rail to be cost competitive, because it's cheaper while you're on rail, but you pay this extra exchange fee, the extra mode change fee for going first from ship to rail and then again from rail to truck. We have done some work recently in Australia, which shows that it is possible even for this relatively short haul rail to be competitive, but it requires some thinking about where the final demand is. How close is it to the railway line? Of course, if you can co-locate industry with railway stations, that's even more effective. And that's where the cement factories, for example, that again need to connect it directly to the railway line in a much better position. But for any other industry that's not directly co-located with a railway station, you then have to think about that last leg.
Yeah, there are several strands to this, aren't there? From what I understand, the railway line will certainly help the cement factories, but what you're still trying to understand is how it could help other industries as well. Is that correct?
That's how I would see it, that the other industries are not currently easily set up, that we already have concentrated industrial precincts or business areas where you could say, here we can simply connect this one area to the railway. And so we have to look at a larger region and see how that connects to the railway. We saw in the panel earlier today that building roads to these railway stations is one of the things that the government's really thinking about. But you need not just a road, you then have to think about the infrastructure for example, moving containers between trucks and trains and so on.
Professor Siti, if I could bring you in here as well, of course, the key to all this is the people who live along the railway line and the businesses that live along the railway line. And I guess part of your job is thinking about what do they need from it? How will it help their businesses grow, for instance? I know that because of coronavirus, it's been a little bit more difficult to get on the ground, but what have you learned so far about the communities and their hopes for what the railway line might bring them?
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, we haven't done much, but we've been thinking that we need to understand what they do every day, and then the origin and destination of like their trips, and also what mode of transport they use every day. And we would like to understand whether shifting to railway transport will be beneficial for them. And as discussed before, that in many countries, the use of railways need subsidies, especially in the urban areas. And it takes a lot of money. And so we need to investigate whether the government has some schemes. Yeah, it's very nice that the government, the central government, has put a lot of effort to build the railways, and so we need the support from the provincial and also the kabupaten and local government also to give what we call it, socialization, something like that. Yeah, to make people understand that railway is better in many things, like in environment, and then also faster, and also in total will reduce the transport costs and also infrastructure costs. But not everybody understands about that. So it's a lot of things to do to make people understand. That is the first. And the second, it's yeah, usually people choose transport modes which is the cheapest. It means maybe fastest, and also the tickets is lowest, but they don't take into account other costs like environmental costs, sometimes even safety costs. So we need to give understanding about this to people. And yeah, we need to investigate, to ask people about their willingness and also their ability, like to pay, and then willingness to pay to use the railways, something like that. So yeah. I think it's still a lot of things to do. Yeah.
Yes, which is why the research is needed. There's so many questions
yeah.
to be answered. Yeah, to make sure that everyone benefits.
Yeah.
Can I perhaps follow up with this? Because I think it's really interesting to think about what Ibu Amma has mentioned, that it's the cost, but not just in monetary terms, but also in time, in convenience. Right? And there have been a number of studies around the world that have shown that if you make public transport more convenient, less delays, better connections, then more people will use public transport. Perhaps not entirely surprising, but it shows that while at the moment, on paper at least, this railway line looks like it's very competitive because at a top speed of 150 kilometers an hour, you can go from one end to the other theoretically in an hour, which is much faster than you could do this journey by car. It all depends on what is the schedule, how often will the train stop, what happens when you get to the other end and you now need to connect to a bus or something else to your final destination. And so it's, again, the scheduling and the interconnectivity that will drive a lot of these, the value that people get from this railway system in terms of how convenient it is, how quickly they actually get to their final destination.
And that is in fact one of the complications, isn't it, Professor Andreas, that you will have both passenger trains and freight trains running on the same line, and I guess there is a danger there for competing or conflicting demands on that. Is that something else you'll be looking at?
Certainly, and it's the picture from behind me, which is taken from this railway line, shows a lot of it is single track. And so one of the things we've done so far is at least a preliminary investigation of the scheduling capacity on the single track, because obviously you can only have a train going either in one direction or the other, not passing each other in the middle. And so that limits how many trains you can run. And it's complicated by the fact that freight trains are much, much slower than passenger trains, and so also going in the same directions, the faster trains can't overtake, except at the sort of railway stations where you have double track, and that provides a real limitation. And what our preliminary studies indicated is that even if you only have a relatively small number of freight trains, it can have a serious impact on the timeliness of passenger trains, that you have to stop and delay passenger trains in order to work around those freight trains. And so there will be that competition between the freight users of this railway network and the public transport users, and perhaps complicated by the fact that this will not be controlled by a single organization. There will be different companies running different services and competing for this scarce track time resource.
Scarce track time. I like that phrase. That's definitely a tricky one to work with. Professor Nyoman, if we can go to you with your understanding of logistics, how can this be managed? I know that really this railway line is the first of what they hope will be more infrastructure projects in the region, and it will go some way to proving what is possible when you put a rail line down. But can those sorts of challenges be worked with in the initial phase to make people feel confident that a one-track rail line can lead to something better and can move their goods and their people along?
Yeah, that's quite a question that we still need to answer, actually. But for sure, we could say that the passenger will normally go on the daytime, and probably I'm not sure yet if probably we can adjust the schedule. Like for example, the freight will be mainly focused on the night time or early in the morning, and then sometime from 7 to 5 o'clock or to 6 o'clock probably we can focus more on the passenger. So I think this is not yet done, but I think there is a potential to try to slotting the time due to the limitation of the capacity. Then we probably have to segment the time when the passenger should be prioritized and when the freight could move freely. So that could be one of the questions that probably we need to answer in our study.
That's a really good solution, it seems, on the face of it. I hadn't even thought of that. What about seaweed? Now, of course, one of the industries that PEAR is putting attention to is seaweed, and there are high hopes for the industry for South Sulawesi. It's one of the main commodity industries in South Sulawesi. Ibu Siti, I will ask you about the people who work in the seaweed industry, but Professor Patnyoman, to you first, do you think seaweed as a commodity has a place in this new rail line system?
Yes, I think so, but we still have to assess the quantity and also the connectivity to the point where the seaweed are produced. When we talk about the rail transportation, it is normally good for high volume and for long distance. But for seaweed, I think we need really to assess the suitability of using the train. But for sure, it has a potential to move seaweed through the railways. But I think it is not yet been studied whether this will be good for rail transportation, or it is better to still use road transport for moving seaweed from the point of origin to the port, for example.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense when you think about it. And then also links back to your comment around this is where, rather than having a raw commodity, you could think about manufacturing instead, value adding to the goods that are in the region already. And that might make it more financially efficient to move them along. On Professor Andreas, I'll go to you. This is something that you look at as well, is that sort of economic efficiency, I guess. And that is obviously a part of your work.
Absolutely. And so the idea here is that transport is typically seen as an extra cost when you're producing something. And so you're trying to really minimize that. Freight transport is very strongly cost driven, and so it has to be cost competitive. And so when we look at, is rail able to move goods, we're not just looking at, is it physically possible, but is it really economic? And you have to always look at, is it cost competitive with road? And that's where you really have to look at this as an optimization problem. What's the best solution? And that's the kind of approach that we're taking to modeling and understanding this transport system.
Could you perhaps explain to us, and I'll ask everyone this, for you, Andreas, explain to us what work will be done in the field to get that information, to collect that data?
Well, that is difficult, right? We don't necessarily have all of the data available, but we do have a fair bit of data that's about the geographic distribution of, firstly, what the railway network is and some of the road networks, but also where different agricultural goods, for example, are being produced. And so we can get some idea of where the demand is, where the population lives, where the demand for imports is, so that we can look at this geographic distribution of where flows originate from and where they have to get to, so that we can look at what is the most cost-effective form of transport for this and what role can rail play in that. And then from that, we can derive what are the extra infrastructure facilities that we might need in terms of road rail connectivity and things like that to make that possible.
Yeah, and I guess what I was thinking about, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, sorry, but I was thinking about the ability to get data now might be limited, but you still have access to some. And in the future, potentially, what you'll be doing is adding to that data pool and proving how important having information is to making these smarter decisions and being able to feed that back to the officials that you're working with, for instance.
Yeah, well, that's definitely true. And in some sense, the difficulty here is we have to have, we want data for something for the future, for what might be. Right? And a lot of this is kind of chicken and egg, because as you build facilities, then it might change the sort of decisions then companies make about where they establish their industry. And so the demand will change in part in response to the infrastructure that is being provided.
Professor Siti, if I can go to you now, and let's look a little bit more at the work that you've been leading on, and that is around community and people, but also environment, which to me is quite interesting. You would think Indonesia, of course, you have to think about the environmental hazards. Could you tell us a bit about the work you've done so far on events such as flooding and landslides, and what kind of work you are planning to do for the next few years of this project?
Yeah.
It's a big question. Take your time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we have done a bit, and then in the future we will continue. Yes, in Indonesia, as you understand, there are many potential disasters because we have a lot of rains, and also the land use along the railway lines might change. So we need to investigate about that. But yeah, we have to minimize the risk, so we have to mitigate about that. So we will do it later, because now we just have some identification, but we haven't got the final results yet. Just identification about that. And also we look at the like you asked me before about the density, people density along the rail line. So there are negative and also positive impacts in the future. Yeah.
Have you found that there are particular sections of the planned rail line that are more prone to, say, a landslide or flooding?
I don't think so. Ibu Emma have been doing about that, and what we learned so far, we haven't got that conclusion yet.
But obviously vitally important to go into the planning around mitigation measures and
yeah,
and making people aware, I guess, of the landscape around them.
Yeah.
I'd like to go now into the intermodal aspects, you know, and there are so many things around this, and I'll start with you, Professor Siti. You talked earlier around, you know, people have to have access to buses, for instance, you know, and there is a grand vision in Indonesia to create these centres of transit, you know, where people can, as you say, park their bike, their motorbike, and then catch the train. Or if they get to the city of Makassar, are there buses that can take them for their shopping or whatever? How can you explain the work that's being done in this area and the intermodal aspects for passengers, for a start?
Yeah, that is the question that we would like to ask, because we haven't got the information, the complete information about that. But it's nice because the people from the Dinas Perhubungan and also from the government, the Percepatan team, they support this program. So we do hope that the connectivity will be available, because from their presentation this morning, we haven't seen about that, but we do hope, really hope, that there's some better connectivity, because as Pa Andreas mentioned before, that it is very important, not only the reduced time, but also better, like people have convenience, and it means that easier to transfer, etc., etc. So it's very, very important. So we need to ask that questions. I haven't got the answer, but yes, certainly we will ask that question to people.
Well, it's the value of the research, isn't it, to get that sort of information?
It's very nice. We've got their master plan about what they're going to do to have a better connectivity in the future, and then like what like some stations, and then public transport routes, something like that.
think I remember from your preliminary findings of the report, and perhaps Pat Nyoman, this is where you come in as well, that there is a bit of a disconnect between the plans of, say, the city government in Makassar and the plans of the villages along the line. Perhaps you could talk us through that a little bit. You know, how much of a concern is that to the team while they'll be looking at it? And, you know, once you sort of raise this disconnect or this idea there is a better way to work together, do you think that's possible, given we're in the early stages of the rail line?
Yes, our team, one of the associate fellows is working on the master plan, especially from the perspective of a smart city. So we are in the early stage of trying to collect information on the master plan at the province level as well as at the district levels. And the initial impression is that there is a disconnect between what we intend actually to have at the higher level and what is actually already stated at the master plan of the district level. But we need further details on this. We haven't got enough information to say how much disconnect there is, and whether or not this rail is already somehow in the plan of the district level. But initial impression is that it is not yet there. Then I think it is very important when we talk about, let's say, intermodal exchange, where we need to place some infrastructure like a small warehouse or loading, unloading facilities along the lines. I think it has to be included in the master plan at the district level. So this study is still going on, and we are still collecting more of the information, because not only a single district that we are talking about, but a couple of different districts that are passed along the railways. So I think we need more information and more analysis about this. But for sure, it is very important actually to have it put down in the master plan of each district.
And, you know, the message from the officials in South Sulawesi and the Ministry of Transport and industry groups is that they are keen to see this built in a way that maximizes the benefits to everyone, to communities, to business, to trade. Is that the sense that you're getting, Professor Nyoman?
Now, there was a few workshops that was conducted by our team on the master plan. So that was the first impression. But we also get more information qualitatively from what we have done through our FGD when we were in Makassar last year, for example. So that is collectively providing us information on what I just said. So that was the impression, but I think we need more details to say firmly about what is lagging on the master plan.
Okay. Professor Andreas, I might go to you then. Perhaps you could provide some perspective from the Australian side as to, you know, how you devise something that is intermodal, that is connected, so that the port connects with the railway, connects with the road transport, and those things that are needed to maximize the benefits in terms of freight in this instance. What can you tell us about what has been learnt about that so far?
So I think it's always great to see the Indonesian government is always very good at planning, having 5-year plans, strategic plans, master plans, and so on. But there is always that danger that you have separate organizations doing their own bit of planning for what they have control over, and transport systems, unfortunately, can interconnect a lot of things, affect a lot of different areas. And so you have to have this overarching plan on how the transport system works across all that. As an example, from the Australian side, We have a lot of single track railway systems like this in more mining contexts. And sometimes that is a single mining company that just controls everything, and then it's kind of easy. Sometimes there's a number of mining companies on the same supply chain that have to share this. And then the most effective approach is to have a coordinator that coordinates the shared use of the railway and the shared transport. And so I think something of that nature would be required here to say, we need to have some coordination amongst all the different organizations that want to make use of the railway and that want to operate transport systems around that to make that efficient. Right? And that's partly where I think our research is hopefully going to paint a picture of what might be possible by doing better coordination across these different organizations.
And we have a question in, it's actually come through on my phone, so I'll just read it out. I understand you'll conduct more analysis, but based on your current understanding so far, which areas of planning and investment do you believe would be most impactful to maximise the railway? Keen to get a sense of current hypotheses, if that's possible.
Well, my feeling is that public transport is a really big area. So it's clear that cement is going to benefit a lot from it, because it's a lot of it. It's really heavy. It's going to get a straight benefit of being able to transport to the port. And then probably the next biggest area would be public transport. But that requires a lot of planning. And so I think that would be the next biggest area.
Yeah. Professor Siti and Professor Newman, I'll ask you as well. What areas would benefit most from first investment? And Professor Newman, I'll go to you first, and then Professor Siti for a population perspective.
Yeah, I think after the two that Andreas mentioned, cement and passenger, I think there is also a potential to provide benefit to local manufacturing companies, which is not much yet right now. But this is a national issue actually. When we talk about logistics in Indonesia, people are always talking that we move a lot of cargoes from west to east, but very little from east to west. So that creates a big idling capacity when we talk about transportation in Indonesia, and also one of the source of high logistic costs in Indonesia. So I think there need to be a very strong will from the government in eastern part of Indonesia, including in South Sulawesi, to develop manufacturing companies that could adding value to local commodities and then transport it to the western part of Indonesia. That will be very much good for Indonesia as a whole, can be reducing the logistic costs and improving the local economy. So creating something like industrial zone in South Sulawesi that is close to the railways, I think would be one of a good idea in the future.
Well, as we heard from Professor Wahana earlier on, the railway line is being built because of investment, and they're obviously keen, the Indonesian government's keen to improve the manufacturing base, as you say. But you're suggesting that an industrial park, which is a government-led initiative in a way, isn't it, Professor Newman? You think that government needs to give a signal, basically, to private business?
Yes. Because I think if we can have an industrial zone, government normally will provide some facilities like tax waiver at the beginning, and then also infrastructure that is good to start a business or a manufacturing facility, rather than a standalone manufacturing facility which is not connected to any other infrastructure that is needed. So it's very important for the government to initiate this. And also, I think one of the problems in eastern part of Indonesia is the sufficiency of the utility like electricity and water. That could be also the responsibility of the government by developing an industrial zone.
Very important point. And to you, Professor Siti, when we're looking at where is investment needed first, or where would it have the most impact, I imagine that things such as electricity and water connections and so forth that help business are also helpful to people who live along that rail line. What are your thoughts about where investment is needed first?
Yeah, in terms of railways, I think railways is very important, and it is good that the government plan to finish them in 2021 or 22, and I think to attract more people and also to attract more money. I think it's very important to develop TOD, the transit oriented development in many stations, so it will create businesses and many zones, and I think it will help the railway business to create some money. And the second one, I think it is also very important that we put some effort to have a very good and strong organization for the regulator and also for operator for the track and then for the station, and also the businesses in the zone. The sometimes we call it the, I forgot, that's in the TOD. So it will help to give subsidies, so people will pay less to use the railways, and it is very important to support the sustainable transportation. And I think in sustainable transportation, in social, in the environmental, and also in economics. And I think that is where the government and also the business, like the enterprises and also from the people, to put some money to that. And because I think it's very difficult, or maybe almost impossible, to operate railways, just railways, but we need to create businesses in the many stations. So I think that we need to create that, to make the railway lines possible, and also to create more people live or work near the stations, and so they just they can walk or cycle inside the TOD, and then they use railways when they move from one zone to another zone. Yeah, I think that's very important.
Thank you very much, Ibu. That's very interesting. I have another question that's come in. This is for Professor Nyoman. Can you please give an example of the relative inefficiency of East to West Indonesia logistics infrastructure and how it might impact South Sulawesi's competitiveness? Professor, would you be able to answer that? That's a big picture question.
Yes. At least from the export-import data from the Port of Makassar, where 70% is in terms of incoming containers and 30% is outgoing containers, that is more or less reflecting the imbalance between the cargoes moving west and east. But this is only for Makassar. Makassar is already a little bit good. I mean, we have some volume there. But when we talk about another eastern part of Indonesia, the problem is even more severe, I think, compared to Makassar. So I think this is a rough idea, where 70-30% is what we actually obtain from the data from the Makassar port.
Right. Okay. And I'll finally just ask for a closing question from all of you. If you could just give an answer of a minute or so. You're obviously, you've had a preliminary report, you've shown up some of the challenges that need to be looked at within developing this railway line so that it benefits everyone. You've got a lot more work ahead of you to answer some of these important questions. What's your sense, though, at this point around how the railway line can be an example of what is possible in a province which, you know, hasn't had this kind of infrastructure before? I guess it's what is the potential for this kind of question? And Professor Andres, you did answer it a bit earlier, but I'd like a further perspective from you. If you're someone who's planning this as a way to inspire and aspire business and people in the region, is this rail line a good start, to say the least?
Yes, so maybe I want to pick up on the sort of comments that Professor Newman and Ibu Alma have made, that we're not hoping to plan our railway here for what's already existing. The really exciting thing is the potential to spawn new industry, new areas, and new things happening that simply don't happen without that. So we're trying to picture what might be possible with an efficient transport system, allowing more people to move further, to access jobs and services, and goods to move more cheaply, bringing a new industry and new businesses to the area.
And Professor Newman, is it exciting for someone like you involved in trade and logistics to have the opportunity to work on a project like this?
Yes, sir. I have been thinking that islands like Sulawesi and probably Sumatra should use more of the railways in transporting passenger as well as freight. But for very, very long time, I think we have neglected the development of the railways. Even in Java, it is not much utilized. Only recently, government has put more attention on the railways. I think it's very exciting if these railways can be utilized very much in the future. That would be very much good news.
Thank you, Professor Newman. And to you, Professor Sethi, with a keen interest on communities and how the railway line can benefit people. We heard about the need to sort of explain the benefits almost of the railway line to people so that they make the most of it. What's your sense at this stage as a project that is an ICOM project? I think ICOM project was one of the phrases used in our earlier discussion with the officials. Do you see it as something that will pave the way for this kind of infrastructure in the region?
Yeah, I think railways in Sulawesi, I think it's very important. As other project, railway project, at the beginning, it seems very, very expensive. Maybe it's not very interesting for people, not very, but at the end, we do hope that they will understand that railway is the best way to transport for goods and also for people. And I think, yeah, as we understand that because this is the first railway in Sulawesi, so we need to give more effort to promote railways to people, and it's very good. Yeah, we're happy when eventually people use railways and then they realize that yes, that's very good, like what we now experience in Java, that it's very convenient to use railways, and it's the safest transport mode is railways. So yeah, we do hope that it will become reality in the future. We support all the programs that the Ministry of Transport have, and also from the other ministry, like from the like many also private like Tonasa, Posua, and also for the people we have to learn more about it. We don't understand much about people at this moment, but we would like to learn more.
But you will, you will. Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And that's where we'll have to leave it. What a fabulous discussion with 3 experts. It's always a pleasure to be able to do that. I would like to thank our panelists today, Professor Siti Malkamah from Universitas Gadjah Mada, Professor Andreas Ernst from Monash University, and Professor Nyoman Pujuan from the Institute of Technology 10 November. And of course, they are all senior fellows with the Australia-Indonesia Centre, working on the transport project as part of our major research project called PAIR. Thank you for your time and attention. I'm now delighted to say that we're joined by Alison Duncan, who's a RAP member. That's our sort of oversight advisory panel for our research projects, and Minister Counsellor for Economic Investment and Infrastructure at the Australian Embassy in Jakarta. She's kindly joining us to provide some closing remarks. Thanks so much for your time, Alison Duncan.
Thanks, Helen. Selamat siang, Bapak, Ibu, dan salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Thank you to all of the distinguished speakers and the PAIR team and researchers for a really engaging and relevant discussion today. It's my pleasure to provide closing remarks. We all know that good quality infrastructure has an important role to play in meeting the needs of communities and in supporting employment growth and productivity. And this South Sulawesi railway line is a really important piece of the transport ecosystem that includes the construction of Makassar's new port and the expansion of Sultan Hasanuddin Airport. Well-planned and integrated infrastructure will help Indonesia to maximise the impact of its own investments. And as today's speakers have said, the new railway line presents real opportunities for greater connectivity that could underpin resilient and inclusive economic growth for decades to come. The research presented today provides us with great insights on how to maximise this opportunity by linking transport planning with environmental risk assessments, master plans, and demographic and land use data, and importantly, to ensure that vulnerable people and communities can also benefit from these investments. Of course, COVID-19 is at the top of all of our minds right now. And earlier this month, Australia and Indonesia signed a deal for a $1.5 billion loan to support Indonesia's COVID-19 recovery. In addition, our development program, including our long-standing and productive partnership with Indonesia on infrastructure, has pivoted to address some of these immediate needs. Our bilateral and multilateral infrastructure programs are helping the Indonesian government to prioritise its infrastructure spend and providing advice at national and subnational levels on how to deliver the most productivity-enhancing outcomes while boosting employment in areas hard hit by the pandemic. But longer-term issues haven't gone away. We know that despite higher infrastructure investment over the last 5 years or so, Indonesia is still estimated to have an infrastructure deficit of about $1.5 trillion US. So exploring alternative financing sources for infrastructure is all the more important during periods of fiscal stress like right now. And one of the key things that influences increased financing, particularly from the private sector, is the investment climate in a country. The Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or IA-CEPA, is a good starting point for creating greater certainty for Australian investors looking to invest in Indonesia. And of course, so is the Omnibus Law on job creation for investors more broadly. But more work does need to be done to make Indonesia a more attractive destination for foreign investment. I see PAIR's interdisciplinary and cross-country approach to research as a sign of our mature partnership and is highly complementary to our existing development cooperation program and the rest of Australia's bilateral relationship with Indonesia. I welcome this research collaboration because it's really well placed to generate evidence that can be used by stakeholders at the national and the local level to drive better policy outcomes, like the ones that have been talked about during this session. I look forward to hearing more about the early findings on the health and aspirations of young people and the entry points for jobs and skills development. Thank you very much, and congratulations on a great session today.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alison Duncan, the Minister Counsellor for Economic Investment and Infrastructure at the Australian Embassy in Jakarta. Well, that ends our second day of panelists and policy speakers as part of our Digital Summit Prepare 2020. It's been a great day, and thank you so much for joining us and joining in the conversation. We hope that you learned something from it. And of course, if you have any follow-up queries about the research work that the Australia-Indonesia Centre is doing, please get in touch. There is lots of information on our website, australia-indonesia.org. Now, of course, we haven't finished our summit. We have 2 more days to go. And the next event will be held on Tuesday, the 1st of December. That's next Tuesday. And that's where we're looking at supporting the development and aspirations of South Sulawesi's youth. We've got some details on the screen there on how to register. And there's also more information on our website, on our webpage, sorry, if you go down to the pair icon at the bottom. The next event after Tuesday is on Thursday, addressing public health and disability of youth in South Sulawesi. So 2 very important subjects that tie into the work that we do with young people in South Sulawesi, and of course understanding their aspirations and needs and the research that can help them move forward as well. So don't forget to join us next week for those 2 sessions. Thank you for your time again today, and we'll see you next week.